Hi everyone, how are you doing? It's a nice sunny day here in London, so I woke up a bit early and I finished reading Andre Aciman's new novel Find Me, his sequel to Call Me By Your Name. Very exciting, so I'll talk about this in a video soon. But I also finished this week reading the rest of the shortlist for the Booker Prize, and I think only have a couple more books to read from the long list, but those aren't like a massive priority now, though I still want to get to reading them. But yeah, so I've finished reading all the shortlist, and and I have that sort of a slightly elated feeling that we get that when we finish a reading project of I can read whatever I want now, and it feels a bit. I mean, obviously I could have anyway, but it just feels a bit more exciting now that I can just read whatever I want. And I feel like I'm a bit behind on new publications, and so there's some new books coming out this month that I want to get to reading, and so I'm going to talk about a number of them, but also it was my birthday a couple weeks ago, like I said in a recent video, and I was given several books for my birthday, so I want to show those to you and talk about those as well, because yeah, I'd really be excited to read those as well. So also for my birthday, just wanted to show I was given this wonderful mug because I'm a massive fan of the Golden Girls. I could just rewatch them endlessly, and so I have my Golden Girls t-shirt here as well, which I'm such a geek. I don't mean to be a complete stereotype as well, but yeah, I could just endlessly rewatch the Golden Girls, and I particularly love this mug because it's really massive. It holds a lot of tea, and I like drinking a lot of tea, and but I also wanted to show this this slightly off topic from books, but I just wanted to show this box set of the Golden Girls that many years ago when I went to China, I picked up this box set of the Golden Girls in a shop that was selling illegal made copies of DVDs, and there's this whole box set of the Golden Girls, and it was selling for quite cheap, and at the time it was really expensive to buy one in the UK, so I picked it up while I was in China. But the hilarious, really funny thing about it is on the back of it, they had just made this back, which and copied this text from the IMDb, which says, "As with any long-running show, there are many inconsistencies between episodes." So they obviously didn't check what the English was actually saying when they copied it onto the back of this box set, because it's heavily criticizing the show. But so I find that really hilarious. But anyway, that's yeah, just a funny side thing that I wanted to show. So yeah, starting with some books that I was given for my birthday. So my wonderful friend Christy, who's a friend of mine since high school, that I've known a really long time, she sent me a couple books from the US, starting with The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. And this is a book which has been talked about a lot on BookTube, so I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it already. You made me want to read it, and there have been some really positive reviews and some other more mixed reviews of it, but because of the subject matter and the sound of it, I've just been really excited to read it. So it's about a man in New York in the 80s who notices a lot of his friends become HIV positive and start dying of AIDS, and he's fearful that he will contract it as well. And then it's a dual narrative, I think, and also follows woman in the 2000s, recalling back on this time period. So yeah, I've just heard such great things about this now, so I really want to get to it. And then she also sent me a book of short stories called A Girl Goes Into the Forest by Peg Alford Pursell. And these are very short tales, which are sort of plays on fairy tales, and you can tell the cover really evokes that. And it's interesting how I think they're very, very short stories. A lot of them are only like 2 or 3 pages long. So it'll be interesting to see how much she's able to convey in that short a space of time. So I think it's a real talent to write short stories like that, So yeah, I'm very excited to read those. But yeah, Christy, she doesn't have a BookTube channel, but she's on Twitter. So I'll put the handle of her Twitter down below in case you want to follow her. She always talks about books and hike she goes on. She's a wonderful person and a very dear friend of mine. So yeah, I was also given by my partner's parents the novel A Thousand Ships by Natalie Haynes, which I've been wanting to get a copy of for ages, ever since Anna James was talking about it very excitedly earlier this year when we were making our Women's Prize videos, and this was actually published within the year that'll make it eligible for the Women's Prize next year. So it's a novel I want to get to that might be up for the Women's Prize next year. And like we talked about in that video, it covers a lot of the same period in the same subject matter as Pat Barker's recent novel, which is a retelling of a Greek myth of the fall of Troy, told from the perspective of women, and this does the same, but Anna thinks that this novel does it a lot better. So yeah, I'm very eager to read this. And my parents gave me a copy of Laura Beatty's novel Lost Property, which is a new novel that was published a few months ago that I've been wanting to get to, and I've heard really good things about. It's about a woman living in modern day Britain who becomes disillusioned with the country and what it means, and wants to reconnect with Europe, and funnily enough, as Brexit is happening, and so she goes on a road trip across Europe to see it for herself. And on the back of the book, there's a quote from Sarah Moss, the author of Ghost Wall, who calls it clever, brave, and urgent. I thought about Lost Property for days after I finished it, and I really value her opinion because I love her writing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading Lost Property. And then my wonderful friends Emily and Martin gave me a cookbook, a copy of the Dishoom cookbook. This is an Indian restaurant in London, and it's a I think a small chain of restaurants. I think there's 3 or 4 of them, or maybe more. But very, very good Indian food. And Indian food is something I love to eat, but I often feel a bit hesitant to cook it because it usually involves a lot of ingredients and a long cooking time. So it's quite intimidating to make the recipes, but I'd love to replicate some of the recipes from this. So yeah, lots of tempting pictures, but also a lot of text about the history of the restaurant and the history of the cuisine they make. And one dish in particular that I want to make is bell. And I don't know if you've ever had Indian bell. It's this wonderful, savory, sort of puffed rice, but mixed with lots of herbs. And and usually there's like pomegranate seeds or some kind of fruit mixed in there as well, but also lots of different spices, and it's really, really good. So I'm excited to make this at home. So, watch out. There might be a sort of cooking with Eric video coming up sometime soon. So a few weeks ago, I got an email from Asusume Books, which is a Japanese book subscription service. So if you subscribe to their service, they'll send you a new work of Japanese literature every month that's been translated into English. And they asked me if I wanted a free book recommendation. So I said sure, because I was like a free book. And so I sent them some of my favorite Japanese books that I've read. And they came up with this suggestion that they sent me, which is The Devotion of Suspect X by Keigo Higashino. And this is a novel about a single mother who her ex-husband arrives one day on her doorstep and just completely shatters her world. And it follows the story of a detective who tries to piece together what happened that evening. And I don't often read thriller novels like this, but yeah, I like the premise, and the type of the novel is quite large, so I think it'll be quite quick to read. And I just love that it came with this personalized book recommendation, which is handwritten in very neat handwriting, much more neat handwriting than I have, and as well as a lovely bookmark. And so yeah, I think it's just a lovely idea. So I'll put a link below down to Asusume Books if this is a service that you think you might want to join. Other books that this month that are being published and that I'm eager to read. I was sent this very small, it's a very small book of the BBC National Short Story Award short stories, the stories that have been listed for this prize. And I think the winner is going to be announced at the beginning of October. And I was especially interested to read these because one of the shortlisted authors is the Irish author Lucy Caldwell, whose book of short stories I read before and really enjoyed. So yeah, I think it'll be fun to read the short stories for this prize, and I keep meaning to read more short stories. I found myself just gravitating to novels all the time, but yeah, I would really like to read more. Also, very exciting that this month, I was just mentioning Anna James before, and her second novel is being published this month. This is Pages and Co. Part 2, Tilly and the Lost Fairytales. And so her first book was published last year. These are novels for young adults, all about the wonders of reading, and who better to write about this subject than Anna James. And so yeah, this adventure, Tilly goes to Paris, so you can see the Eiffel Tower there on front. And so yeah, this very beautiful cover for her book. But also, I think her first book is only just coming out in America, and so actually just this coming week she's embarking on a US tour. So if you're in the US and want to see Anna James talking about Tilly and her book Wanderers, then yeah, look up on Anna James' social media. I'm sure she's talking about where she's going and what she'll be doing. So I'll put her Twitter handle down below. Against Memoir by Michelle T. And Michelle T is an author I've always wanted to read, but I've never actually read. She's one of those authors that I feel like I'll really love her writing once I actually read it, but I haven't got around to it yet. And this is subtitled Complaints, Confessions, and Criticism. So it's her talking about her experiences of queer and misfit life across America. So yeah, very excited to read that. These are 3 reprinted novels by Thomas Bernhard that Faber have put out, because it's been 30 years since Thomas Bernhard's death, and so they've been republishing his novels. And I've been especially wanting to read Thomas Bernhard recently because Lucy Ellman talked about her recently. I can't remember if it was an interview I read about her or if it was actually in the novel Ducks Newburyport, but she talks about being a big fan of Thomas Bernhard. And yeah, and I've just heard really good things about these. So there's The Loser, which is about 3 aspiring concert pianists, and I've got personal recommendation from somebody I follow on Twitter. And then there's one called Wittgenstein's Nephew, which is about 2 men in an Austrian hospital in 1967, and follows their travails. And obviously one of them is the nephew of Ludwig Wittgenstein, the philosopher. And then there's one called The Woodcutter. So yeah, I'd really like to explore this author's work because I've never read him before. Next are a trilogy of memoirs by Tove Ditlevsen, who is an author from Denmark that I've never read before, but these are newly translated memoirs being published by Penguin Classics, and she's sort of known as being one of Denmark's most prominent writers, and I love a good memoir that explores childhood. So this is known as her Copenhagen trilogy. So it starts with childhood and then goes into youth, and then the third book is called Dependency. And yeah, there's something about these books I'm just drawn to reading. And there's an Irish reviewer who I like following, who is a big fan of these. So yeah, eager to get to these memoirs. The Dressing Up Box by David Constantine. These are short stories, and like I said, I've been wanting to read more short stories, and all of the stories revolve around a moment of personal crisis, whether that's a bereavement or a crisis of identity or a big personal failure. And David Constantine is the author of a short story that inspired the film 45 Years. If you saw that film, it's a really beautiful film. And so yeah, so I'm quite curious to see what his fiction is actually like. The Rabbit Girls by Anna Elroy. This is a novel which takes place in Berlin during the time when the wall is falling, and it's about a young woman who's caring for her dying father, and she discovers as he's lying in bed dying that he has a hidden tattoo from Auschwitz. And so the novel is her process of discovering what happened to her father and his secret history, which he's never told her about. And like I said a few months ago, I've been wanting to read more books set in Berlin. The Secrets We Kept by Laura Prescott. This novel, which has been getting a lot of buzz and excitement around it. So it follows the story of the creation of the novel Dr. Zhivago and the process of getting it published into print. And so it's a novel, but it's based on that real life story. And Dr. Zhivago is a novel I've never read, but oddly, when I was younger, I loved the film. I thought it was a really beautiful film, and it's quite a mature film for a young person to watch. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I've heard the novel of Dr. Zhivago is a bit of a slog to get through, so I'm not sure if I'd actually read Dr. Zhivago before reading this. And I've heard that you don't actually need to know the story of Dr. Zhivago to get what this novel is about. So yeah, I'm very excited to read this. Breaking and Mending by Joanna Cannon. This is a short memoir from the author of The Trouble with Goats and Sheep and Three Things About Elsie. So if you like her fiction and want to read her memoir account, this would be really interesting. And it's her experiences as a junior doctor. And so she describes the often harrowing experiences of that and the personal crisis she felt while caring for a lot of different patients. And there's a quote on the cover from Kate Mossy, who is the founder of the Women's Prize, and she says, "It is one of the most beautiful books you will ever read." The Secret Life of Books by Tom Mole. This is a really beautiful cover for a book, and it's one of those books about books, which I know is meant to appeal to really geeky readers like me. But I'm sort of sold on it. I think it sounds really interesting. So it's about the history of physical books and the enduring power of physical books, even in an age when there are e-readers and people listening to audiobooks. Physical books still endure. So yeah, I'm quite curious about this. Glitch by Lee Rourke. This is a new novel about a man, a British man who's been living in the US for 2 decades, and he takes a plane to go back to the UK when there is suddenly a glitch in the plane. And things take a very big dramatic turn. So I've heard really good things about this short dramatic novel. Next, I have a short graphic novel called I Go Quiet by David Ouimet. And this is a book about an introverted girl who struggles to find her place in a noisy world, but through the power of books and imagination and creativity, she starts to imagine a future point where she can have a place and be happy. And I like the slightly creepy gothic cover to it, and it has positive quotes on it from Philip Pullman and Neil Gaiman. So this is probably going to be really good. The Art of the Body by Alexander Allison. This is a novel about 2 characters in modern day London. One of them named Janet, who is a care worker, and she is caring for a young man named Sean, who is someone living with cerebral palsy, but who is also an artist. And so it follows their experiences, and they're 2 people who are far from home and their families who have come to London to make a new life for themselves here. Whose Story Is This by Rebecca Solnit. And Rebecca Solnit is an essayist who I've always meant to read and really wanted to read. So these are essays about talking about how sort of the dominant narrative in the media mostly comes from straight white men, and so she's sort of questioning that and querying that, talking about how there might be different ways of introducing different voices into the stories that we are told. A People's History of Heaven by Mathangi Subramanian. This is a novel about 5 different women who are very different from each other, but all living together in a slum in Bangalore, and how the tension of them living next to different, much more affluent communities, and their struggle to make a life for themselves. Next, I have a lovely little edition of newly translated poems from Rumi, who's a 13th century Persian poet, and some of these poems were translated by Brad Gooch, who has written a biography of Rumi, but he's also written a biography of Flannery O'Connor, and Rumi is a poet that I've wanted to read more of him, and I like that this lovely little Everyman's Library edition. And finally, very excitingly, I have this beautiful proof edition of Anne Patchett's new novel called The Dutch House, and look at this. Oh, it's really beautiful. So I think this new novel is about a brother and sister whose parents are quite neglectful and don't care for them, and so they sort of have to depend on each other and make a life for themselves. And Anne Patchett is a writer I've really enjoyed reading in the past. So I haven't read too many of her books, but I'd like to read more. And I've heard really great things about this. So excited about that. So those are all the books I want to talk about. Sorry, it's quite a lot, but yeah, lots of that are really exciting sounding that I want to get to. And I think I might start actually with this memoir by or the first volume of this memoir by Tove Ditlevsen. But yeah, let me know which of these books you think sound most interesting in the comments below, and which you're interested in reading yourself. So I'll speak to you again soon, and happy reading, everyone. Bye.